Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Irish Guys podcast. Yeah, another little video today. I didn't get one out yesterday, but yeah, we've done a bit this week. We've done some on football and stuff like that there, and yeah, we haven't really. As I said, we're kind of doing the sort of sports stuff at the minute by ourselves because obviously we can't get together, and we're just sort of focusing a little bit on the sports stuff because you can keep talking away about it even if you're just by yourself. The nerd culture stuff is definitely more for a group thing. It's good to have the lads in for it, so yeah. Football and stuff recently as well, and in this last few weeks since we started doing these videos, we did a bit of NFL coverage and stuff like that there. We have a basketball video out as well on the YouTube channel. And yeah, now we're uploading all these till Spotify and on our podcast streaming platforms as well. Yeah, so there's no NFL this weekend. Obviously, it would be the weekend of the Pro Bowl. It didn't happen this year, sort of for obvious reasons. Flying everybody to Hawaii and all that wouldn't be really appropriate, I suppose. So yeah, there hasn't really been much to talk about. There's been a little bit of news this week as far as the NFL's went, but I thought that I would do something on the NFL. I was going to do like an awards thing, like an end of season awards type deal. And then I was kind of thinking, right, well, I don't really want to do MVP, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. I was going to try and think of something a little bit different. And then I couldn't think of anything. I had about 3 ideas in my head and I was like, they're not that great. I was going to try and do a wee bit of like alternative awards, something a wee bit different. But no, I didn't really think of that much. Clive helped me out. He threw a couple in. They're okay. But I was just like, nah, fuck it, I'll do something different. So yeah, I was just sitting sort of thinking what could I do for a little bit of NFL coverage or whatever. And I was like, right, I'll do my biggest takeaways from this NFL season. And I just sort of started taking a few notes. And it all sort of just flew into sort of one general sort of topic, really, more than anything. I was going to maybe do it in players, maybe individuals and stuff like that, but just when I started thinking about it, it was just more of the overall game in general, and what's different. As I said, I was gonna maybe talk a little bit about certain quarterbacks and stuff like that there, and maybe a few players, and maybe try and link it back to some of the award stuff that I was thinking of doing. And no, it didn't turn out that way. I did something completely different, and just sort of did like an overarching what I took away from this season in the NFL. Now, obviously, this season's a bit different. It was COVID and everything too. No real pre-season. A lot of teams sort of started slowly and stuff like that there. So it was a difficult season for the NFL, but it kind of went off okay without a hitch. There wasn't too many. There was sort of a little bit of disruption at the midpoint of the regular season. But yeah, I went a complete different angle with this. It was a bit of a different year, but I don't know whether it was maybe watching Breeze and Brady, or maybe that it's a new decade. I suppose it was, last year or whatever at the end of that season. But the NFL seasons are weird like that. It was probably more watching Breeze and Brady face off in the NFC Championship game. And, Brady obviously looks fantastic, but, some of these older quarterbacks are, Philip Rivers is retired now. Ben Roethlisberger doesn't look the same. Breeze is all but done, you would imagine. So maybe it was that. I think it was that probably more than anything. Watching these sort of older quarterbacks, like obviously quarterbacks, if you're good enough, you have a healthy lifespan in the league, you can play right up. Brady's 43, so you can play a little bit longer than the rest of the positions in the NFL if you're good enough. So, when I started watching the NFL or following it, I've sort of mentioned it a few times in the podcast. It was kind of maybe 2006, maybe 2007 was my first real sort of interest in it. And then, by 2007, 2008, I'd sort of, picked a team, and then by about probably say 2010, I was fully fledged. Like, yeah, I love the sport. So everything, especially with them quarterbacks, a lot of them quarterbacks had already been established. They were starters, they had their job nailed down, and you know they've been a staple in the league since I started watching. Really, Brady was in the early 2000s. You think of Breeze, Peyton, Eli, Philly Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Brett Favre, and then Aaron Rodgers to an extent. These guys have all kind of been here since I started watching it. So I think it was that. I think this was the thing that sort of set me off down this train of thought today. So them all getting a little bit older and fading out of the league and stuff like that there has set me off this way. So I wanted to just talk about the league, and the first point that I read was times are changing. The league's changing big time. Things are very, very different now, and it started. And when the first bullet point I took on this was the QB position. The QB position, the quarterback position, is different now. It is so much different. When you look at the likes of Breeze, Big Ben, Philly Rivers, Brady, even Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, these quarterbacks that, as I said, have been around since I started watching this, they're all fading out now, and in a way they all were similar. The sort of pocket passer quarterback, the prototype, some more so than others, has to be over 6 foot, big, strong, physical, with a good arm. And, that was the prototypical quarterback, the big, strong, 6'4", can see over the offensive line. And the QB position's changing. You now have the likes of even somebody like a Patrick Mahomes, who is probably a little bit more prototypical. He has got the physical stature and size, but is good with his legs. You now need to be a mobile quarterback. The league's changed. It's changed so much, and you can't get away with being an immobile quarterback anymore, I don't think, and I don't think it's going to get any easier for people like that in the future. All the quarterbacks coming into the league now have got running ability, or so it seems at least. You think of the top guys that have come in recent years: Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. The list goes on and on. Even people that you wouldn't maybe consider at the very, very top, maybe somebody like Jared Goff, is still reasonably okay with his legs, can move, actually does like to throw on the run, does like a little bit of play action and stuff. So the quarterback position has fundamentally changed. The statuesque pocket passing quarterback, I think, is going to be something of the past now. Things are developing and changing at a quick rate. I remember maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. I think it wasn't it Chip Kelly joined the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm nearly sure he was out of Oregon. And there was that debate around that time. Say it was, and I can't remember just precisely when, but I think it was maybe that sort of length of time ago, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. And the discussion around the league was, this is the most innovative mind in college football. He runs a different system. It's spread, it's open, stuff like that. And the conversation around punditry and stuff in the NFL was that this college revolution, this college style offense that is simplified, that is, not as intelligent as the way that they were sort of framing it, a lot more basic, is never going to work in the NFL. And maybe it's because it's a new decade too, or something that it was coming, and I think we all know it was coming. But I think really, especially in this season, definitely last season, this last couple 2-3 years, it's really took hold. There's a lot. RPO wasn't really a thing that was born out of this college revolution. A decade back. That was an early thing. You seen the likes of maybe the innovators in it with like RG3, Cam Newton, and And that was the talk that time, that length ago, where it was, this will never work. You need to have a more dynamic, you need to have a more conventional offense, and this college stuff is never going to adapt into the NFL. Now, we've definitely seen it this last few years, but I just think that this year especially, there's been so much change in the NFL. There's been a youth movement in coaching. A lot of the older guys, the sort of the staples of the league, have been moved on and moved out. General managers and front offices are going for younger and especially offensive-minded head coaches. You think of the Sean McVays and the Shanahans and stuff like that there, and then this new, like LaFleur as well. There's a big youth movement on in coaching. New younger coaches with fresher ideas and who have been brought up through college probably at some point in these systems. You also think then of the quarterbacks that are coming through. If for the last 10 years all college systems have been run like this, so they know nothing different. And the sort of sticking ground maybe 5-6 years ago was, we have to throw all that stuff that you've learned in college and we have to throw it out the window, and you have to learn an entirely new way to play the game. The old way was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. There were some great quarterbacks that flourished in it. But the easier option was, well, this is what you ran in college. We'll use our offense to run it. And teams begun to see success using it. So once the success happened and these sort of types of plays and offenses started working in the NFL, more coaches adopted it. Now then there's more coaches promoted out of college positions and brought into the NFL. And then they implemented their systems, implemented what they knew to a quarterback that knew them type of systems as well. And the quarterback that became more molded for that type of role, moving away from the old guard of statuesque pocket passing quarterbacks and more into the more dynamic RPO, athletic, fast, can move type style quarterbacks. It just seems like what did set me off is these sort of these older quarterbacks falling away now, and everything's changing. Everything in the NFL is changing. Defenses. Well, I'll stay on offense for a bit with the quarterback talk. So the run game has fundamentally changed as well. Me and Vesty definitely have talked about this a little bit. We've sort of hinted at it a wee bit on the podcast over this year. Derrick Henry somewhat is a dying breed. Me and Vesty about our back and forth about running back play and whether I really like Derrick Henry or not. And I sort of said, I would have loved Derrick Henry sort of 10-15 years ago. I think that he would have been all pro. Well, he would have been one of the very, very best at what he does. Now, he's still rightly up there. But with the move away from running the football, in all honesty, and the move away from that style of running, Tennessee have done okay so far, but they have yet to properly succeed with Derrick Henry leading the offense, really. You think about all the offenses that are good around the league now. Kansas City, their run game is functional probably. Buffalo, who they played in the AFC Championship game, had no run game at all this year, none. It was actually unbelievably bad. The New Orleans Saints, with Alvin Kamara and the likes of it, a different style. You look about who the best running backs in the league are. The running backs have changed. Derrick Henry isn't the prototype anymore. The Adrian Petersons, the Marshawn Lynches, they aren't the prototype anymore. What the prototype is now as a running back is what used to be known as a scat back. Your Darren Sproles, your pass catching, third down back that came in certain spots to make plays. The smaller, more athletic, twitchier running back is now what you need. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, got drafted this year in the first round by the Kansas City Chiefs for that exact role. You think of Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Christian McCaffrey. even somebody who is quite unique and different in the likes of Saquon Barkley is better probably in the open field. He can run between the tackles, but that's not what he's the best at. You've seen the likes of a running back like Ezekiel Elliott this year, who has struggled and hasn't looked like himself, and he's more in the mold of an older running back. It's an aging mold, that type of running back, the between the tackles, grind it out, 3 yards, 2 yards, 6 yards, back to 2. It's them type of running backs are slowly dying out too. Long gone are the days of 20 carries, 14 of which are between the tackles. They're long gone. You're now even seeing multiple teams around the league going for a running back by committee, having 2 and 3 running backs on your roster. One of which is maybe more of a passing expert and very much in the mold of a scat back. Maybe one who's a little bit more of a bruiser, and then maybe one who's a bit more of an all-rounder. Instead of, you're handed to them 20 times a game running back. It's not, you may now get 20 touches, but 10 of them or 8 of them might be carries. Or, you could get 8 carries a game with 8 catches a game, The running back position is changing so much. There's no more power O pulling guards and stuff like that there right up the middle. Now, there is some offenses that are still carrying it around the league, but my team, the Minnesota Vikings, do like to run a little bit of power. You have multiple linemen and tight ends out there, and a fullback, and you've got your running back there with one wide receiver in the field. Now, Mike Zimmer's an old school guy and stuff like that. You've seen it being applied a little bit in Cleveland this year. But from a point in time where it was the done thing around the league, it is now few and far between. It's completely different than, say, 15 years ago when every team needed their 20 carry a game running back, and you were lost without it. As I said, there is some teams doing it. You do think of the likes of Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, maybe Nick Chubb as well a little bit, but it's not there anymore. It's the best offenses, the very, very best offenses, are not running that system anymore. So the offense has changed. Even the wide receiving and tight end position. You look at the likes of somebody like Rob Gronkowski, who was drafted in the late noughties as it is, and had that bigger body, could block. That there is even dying out from tight ends. You now want smaller, more athletic tight ends, somebody like a Travis Kelce, who's more of just a big wide receiver. That's changed. Gronk now looks sort of, now I know he's a little bit older, but he looks slower. Looks less athletically freaky than he once did. And as I said, I know he's older, but you're seeing these other guys like Travis Kelce. Was he not second in the league for receiving yards this year or something crazy like that? The wide receiving position, for example, is more dynamic. You think of what they do with their wide receivers now. So, 10, 15 years ago, your wide receiver and your number one wide receiver played outside the numbers all the time. You then probably had your designated slot receiver, and that's completely changed now. The number one receiver moves into the slot for better matchups on less talented corners. The reason that your number one receiver 15 years ago didn't go into the slot is because usually then you were running a short slant, a crossing route, something of that nature, and you had a middle linebacker shaped like Ray Lewis, who if you ran across the middle was going to knock you into next week. I'm going to get on and talk about defenses, but that's changed. That's changed a lot too. You're now seeing Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, really, really talented receivers going into the slot. That used to not happen. There was too much risk on it. You ran across the middle 15 years ago. You were meeting a linebacker and he was taking his shot against you, and making sure you got hit and hit hard, really, really hard. It just wasn't your thing. You had to have a slot receiver. Now you seen Tyreek Hill lining up in the slot for a slant route on a corner that's not even close to his level, and he takes a 5-yard route to 60-yard gain. That used to not be that used to never happen. So offenses have drastically changed in the way that they're moving and what they're coming up with. As I said, there's been a coaching revolution, younger, more dynamic offensive minds coming into the game, and it's changing. And then on the flip side of that, with the change in offense has come a needed change in defense. So as with playing defense, it's reactionary. Actually playing defense, corners, whatever, it's a reactionary side of the football. You're reacting to everything the offense does. You're not, you can be proactive in some areas with your blitzes and stuff, but mostly defense is reactionary. And with everything that's reactionary, you're behind. If you're waiting on a wide receiver to make a cut or make a move, you have to wait till he does it till you make your move. So, just by nature of that, you're behind. And defenses are behind. And the second point I made when making up my notes was defense is dying a little bit. Not that it's dying and it's dead and it's never coming back, but the old style of defense and it's behind is what it is. It's very far behind. With rule changes for player safety, which is fine. With rule changes and things of that nature, defense is definitely dying a slow death at the minute. Defenses are really struggling. And really, really, really struggling with this offensive revolution that's happening in the NFL. You're starting to see crazy numbers being put up by quarterbacks that maybe haven't got that much arm talent or passing ability. Everybody's running a high tempo and high powered offense, and defenses, and you used to be able to say that defense is the best in the league, and maybe they can carry in for a couple of seasons, and then maybe it changes in 2 or 3 seasons down the line. It fades away and fades out. But now you've genuinely. It's a very hard thing. It's a very hard thing to predict what defense is going to be good in any given year. There was that Bears defense that came up a couple of seasons back, but haven't been the same since. I genuinely have no idea. The Patriots defense was good last year. I genuinely have no idea going into any season now what defense can really stand up to the tests that offenses are putting out there. I'm wondering what, like, everything in sport and everything in competition, sport and competition is sort of cyclical a little bit. It kind of, swings one way and everything happens, and then it kind of comes back on itself and things change. So I'm kind of wondering when, as I said, this sort of offensive revolution is sort of happening in maybe the last 4 to 5 years, but it's really come on this last couple, and I feel like, at this point in time, it's at its peak. So I'm wondering when defenses are going to adapt, change, and take a turn for the for the positive, and sort of draw this sort of swing to the offensive side of the football back towards the middle. I like defensive football, as any Vesti or Clive or anybody that's on for the NFL stuff will tell you. I like defensive football. A lot of my favorite players are defensive players. I love the cornerback position. Love the safe. Any DBs are some of my favorite players. But I'm wondering when defenses are going to catch up. They feel right now like they're just kind of hanging on, and they're sort of a lot of bend but don't break. A lot of them are bend but don't break now. That used to be a thing for some teams. That's what they adopted, like bend but don't break. But there was other defense. You think of the Ravens defense a couple of times, stuff like that. There, we really were imposing their will on offensive teams, like really, really dominating, and carrying teams till the Pittsburgh teams of the mid 2000s, putting making defense their primary thing. And I don't think there's anybody in the league that's... Is there any team in the league that's best side of the ball? Well, is there anybody in the league defensive wise that's really dominating their side of the ball and are leading with that? You know, you could maybe say the Rams a little bit this year, but I think that was just maybe their offense was a little bit poorer. You know, their offense just wasn't as good. So maybe the Rams this year, but you know, there's nobody. Even the Patriots defense from last season, it was like, yeah, they're playing okay, but they can be got at still. They can be got at. And you know, I don't feel like there's no defenses around the league that are terrifying anymore, that are really, really putting the fear of God into opposing offenses. It's not there anymore. At least I don't think it is anyway. Sort of a wee stat that I found, you know, it's a very first level stat or whatever, but a wee stat that I found anyway when looking up some of this stuff. And it probably tails into a wee bit of being a more mobile quarterback, more mobile quarterbacks being in the league too. But it emphasises what I'm kind of trying to get at here, at least a little bit. So in the last 6 seasons, 20 sacks, which was a big benchmark. You know, 20 sacks. You know, who's getting to 20 sacks this year? That was talked about all the time. Or if somebody got to 20 sacks, what a great season they had. What a great defensive player they are, or whatever. So in the last 6 years, 20 sacks has been reached once by Aaron Donald a couple of seasons ago. Shaq Barrett got to 19.5. Was it last season, I think? But yeah, so in 6 years you had it once and then a 19.5. In the 7 years prior to that, it was reached 4 times, and there was also a 19.5. So, you know, 5 out of the 7 times it was fairly close. Only 2 out of 6 in the most recent 6 years has it been touched or close to being touched. So that's probably, you know, more mobile quarterbacks not taking as many sacks, but it's also, you know, just a thing on defense. There used to be so many elite, top quality defensive ends and people that's job it was to just get right after the quarterback. DeMarcus Ware, Jared Allen, you know, Jason Pierre-Paul, people like that there, you know, in the mid and late 2000s. And that's changed. That's definitely changed. And sort of that stat can at least backs it up a little bit. And I'm sort of thinking like where the defenses, or what are defenses trying to do? Like, even like as I said, your big Ray Lewis terrifying middle linebacker isn't there anymore. Linebackers are now used for coverage. You know, I'm going to talk about prototypes and how they're changing a little bit in a while here, but I'm sort of wondering like how the defenses adapt to this. And the one thing that I'm kind of touching on or seeing a little bit is possibly positionless. The NBA has transitioned into this quite a bit in this last number of years. Sort of positionless basketball, and I'm starting to see it a little bit more on defense in the NFL. I think of somebody like Darius Leonard, who one of Esley's favourites, who going into the playoffs, and there was a little bit of talk around in one of the playoff games that he had dropped 20 pounds, and it's helping him on defense. He's a big dude, an athletic dude, but he's not, you know, he's not Ray Lewis in there. Like, he's not that big, and he needed to drop weight to improve his game and, you know, help him in his coverage. We talked about in the podcast earlier in the year, I'm not sure what week it was, but we talked about how when Jamal Adams joined the Seattle Seahawks, he led their defense for at least a couple of weeks in pressures on the quarterback from the strong safety position. So this maybe change into like positionless, at least on the back end anyway, you know, more athletic corners, smaller but faster linebackers, more physical and larger safeties, maybe something along those lines. Hybrids, essentially hybrids. You know, you blitz with your safeties and stuff of that nature. Like that was always prominent, but now, like as I said, Jamal Adams led the Seahawks in pressures from the strong safety position. You like somebody the likes of Harrison Smith from the Vikings, who is in the backfield all the time. You know, linebackers a lot of the time now. Eric Kendricks, Vikings again. Personally, I watch him a lot and think he's one of the best linebackers in football. Is primarily coverage. That's where he makes his money. That's where he excels, is because he's a great pass coverage linebacker. You don't have your Ray Lewis's running right up the middle and clogging the lanes in the run game, because again, back to what I was talking about earlier, they're running between the tackles, and 20 times a game's not there anymore. As I said, I know this stuff has been coming for a few years, but I think it's really taken hold this new decade. All that carry on too, and a lot of the old yard are now moving out. They're all out of the league now, so that's just kind of where I'm at with defense and stuff like that there too. I'm kind of thinking, is there like a 46 defense? It was the one that the Bears, brought to the forefront in 1985, where they just blitzed from everywhere, and that was the 6 behind the 4. But maybe there's something along those lines now, but in a sort of inverse, where it's, instead of setting the house from every angle imaginable, it's now just dynamic hybrids all behind the 4. You maybe have 4 larger linemen, and then everything behind that is sort of safety slash linebackers in the middle, sort of maybe a little bit more physical, and then maybe a little bit more physical and bigger corners, but can stay with faster receivers. Things have definitely changed as far as defense has gone, and just to sort of transition a little bit, then prototypes, what you're asking and what you're wanting from certain positions. There used to be the prototypical linebacker, the prototypical quarterback, the prototypical running back. They're all changing now too, across all positions. As I said, you used to have some of your elite wide receivers playing outside the numbers. Think of maybe like a Randy Moss, who was a lot of deep ball, a lot of deep threat and stuff like that there. But now you have to be an elite route runner as a wide receiver all across the board, because they'll move you around and move you into the slot, things of that nature. And you have to be an elite route runner. You just can't be a deep threat. You have to, like, for example, DK Metcalf, when he joined the league, it's like he's going to be a deep threat. That's what he's going to be. He's a big physical deep threat receiver. He can run routes. He's not the most perfect route runner like a Keenan Allen or something, but the man can run routes. He's not just a big physical bulky receiver anymore. That's not what he is. That's not what they're teaching them now. You have to be versatile. You have to be able to do more than one thing. You have to be good off maybe like a jet sweep or something like that there too. They're going to use you in a lot of different ways. So positionless, at least a little bit. Linebackers, and as I said with the Jamal Adams comparison, like linebackers and safeties, some strong safeties are kind of morphing into a similar role. Most defenses are playing a lot more nickel now anyway. So with a third corner on the field, that used to not be a thing. You used to have to, it was usually 2 corners, 3 linebackers, but that's changed completely. Now it's usually only 2 linebackers out there, because you need a third corner, because 90% of the time most offenses are going to have 3 wideouts on the field, so you can't have a linebacker covering a corner. The defensive end position, as I said earlier, the likes of Jared Allen, DeMarcus Ware, all the great defensive ends whose job it was to just get after and murder the quarterback, and that was their only remit. Are they there anymore? I don't think so. Maybe the Bosa brothers is maybe as close as you can think of. JJ Watt's not getting any younger and stuff like that, so maybe the Bosa brothers is as close as you get to them sort of old school defensive end pass rushers. It's now an edge rusher. You're seeing a lot of teams with the likes of TJ Watt with the Steelers. It's outside linebackers. I think there was maybe the Von Miller revolution that happened, and how good he was, and a lot of teams have taken from that. You want a little bit more speed on the edge. To exploit the tackles. And another one I was thinking of was nose tackles. which used to be a prevalent thing. You maybe somebody like Linval Joseph, who was at the Vikings, Michael Pierce, stuff like that. They're still there. They're still there. But what used to be key with a nose tackle was clogging up the run. A large body in the middle of the defensive line to occupy offensive linemen. They're not in the field anymore because they're a liability. You have a big, physical, 300-pound tackle in the middle of the line, and you have a little back like, say somebody, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire or like a Christian McCaffrey, who are rapid in shorts in small areas in short spaces, short amounts of time, and they're not going to get anywhere close to them. You think of, like as I said, you think of somebody like Big Vince Wilfork, who was a staple in the NFL, an absolutely wonderful nose tackle who used to just occupy space because of his size and occupy offensive linemen. They're not about the league anymore. They're not about the league. And, even the likes of the offensive linemen are now becoming smaller and more athletic because the speed off the edge and stuff like that there. And again, going back to your run game, that probably has a negative impact on the running backs because they're now taught at least a lot more pass protection. Offensive linemen, they're a lot more pass protecting offensive lines than they are run first because it's just not there anymore. So yeah, it was just some thoughts that I had and just rambling away and thinking about what's happening in the NFL. Like as I said, we've sort of seen this coming for about back to the start. We definitely seen this being debated about 8 years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and we've sort of seen it coming for this last 3 or 4 years. But with the moving out of this older guard of like quarterbacks and stuff like that, there, maybe a new decade and everything, it just seems like the league's very, very different, and it's not. With them old quarterbacks, and because they were there all the time, there was still that link to the sort of the past a little bit. Eli's gone, Peyton, Breeze, Philly Rivers, Brady's still clinging in there. But all these guys that I watched and initially, that were initial part of the league when I got there and started watching it, are now gone, pretty much. So that link to the past has gone really, and the youth movement to coaching in the coaching positions and stuff. A lot of the older guys are gone now. A lot of the guys that you'd seen in coaching positions and stuff like that there around the league are not there anymore either. So I just feel like there's just a lot of change in the NFL. There was one other thing that I was going to talk about, which is big old change as well. Player power. The league has to change. It was the no fun league, and that's what everybody coined it as for the longest time as well. And they're becoming more relaxed as owners, at least a little bit, compared to what they used to be. Player power is showing its head, at least a good bit in the NFL. Actually, a lot, to be fair, in the NFL at this moment in time, especially when you think of Deshaun Watson. That he's requested a trade now. You would have never seen that happen. Never ever seen that happen 10, 12 years ago. Quarterbacks, if you were good enough, where you're drafted was where you will be up and until when you are not good anymore, and they would never have let you go. Players come into the league now with massive social media followings and brands already built. They're stars in college. They have their Instagrams, their brand deals and stuff. Whether legal or not, they are pretty well set, and people know who they are by the time they're 19 or 20. So by the time they join the NFL and join the league, they're superstars already. And they can command big money. They get big money. And, it's a different time. Players are starting in, trade requests. They want out of places. It just wasn't a thing for a long time. And, the NFL was the shield, and ownership had final say on absolutely everything, with the franchise tag and everything else. But players can move now. Players can force their way out at least a little bit. You think of the likes of Le'Veon Bell, who forced a move away. Maybe it didn't work for him, but he did it. And things are changing. And hopefully that made sense, that video. It was just sort of rambling away. As I said, I was going to do something completely different, but once I started sort of thinking about it and writing down a few bullet points and stuff like that, it just sort of kept rolling, and it sort of all worked all right and well together. Things are definitely changing in the NFL. It's a new decade, and people are moving on, and there's not many of the old guard left, both in management, coaching, and actual players. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on where the NFL is going and where it's headed. And I'm very interested to see especially what the defense can do, what the defensive side of the ball can do going forward, and sort of adapt and overcome this sort of offensive revolution. And then, worryingly enough, is there a way back, especially with all the rules and the penalties and how much the offense can get away with in the name of player safety, which is very fair, but is there a way back for defense? And what defensive coordinator, innovative defensive coordinator is going to create something that really, once again, establishes that side of the ball can be incredibly dominant when it wants to be and win you titles and win you Super Bowls, because I just don't think that it has been there in this last few years. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Irish Guys Podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Podbean. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks very much. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, tell your friends, all that crack. And yeah, we'll have a wee bit of stuff next week for Super Bowl week. And maybe, I think me and Clyde's going to do another Skype call. So if you're a listener on the podcast apps, do skate over to the YouTube page, because we'll not get the audio from or at least I don't think we'll get the audio from the Skype call onto the the podcast apps, or I'll maybe have a bit of a look at that. But tune in, go and follow our Instagram page. It's where you'll be told what's coming, what we're doing, and everything like that. And then hopefully it won't be too long till everybody's back in the room and we can get back to the regular schedule stuff, because I do miss the nerd topic stuff. It's good crack, and we've got plenty to do. But yeah, that'll do me for now. Thanks very much for listening, folks. Cheers.